technical terminology, we call them ecclesial communities. That means kind of a church community, but they're not. Churches are those who have 7 sacraments and a valid priesthood, okay, passed on from generation to generation, so valid bishops. When the apostle laid on hands, they passed on, we'll talk about that in the sacramental ordinance more, but they passed on the authority to teach and preach and celebrate the sacraments from one generation to the next. And those ecclesial communities did not take with them a valid ordination for some of the other 7 sacraments. Some of them have some of them, but not others. And so they can't be considered a church in the technical sense. Because from our perspective and the Orthodox perspective, that is a church. Valid priesthood, valid 7 sacraments. So,
Father?
yes.
So was the Anglican Church considered a church until they started ordaining women, et cetera?
Well, unfortunately, when their last validly ordained bishops died, and they had no one to validly ordain anymore.
Okay.
And so, at a certain point, not.
Okay.
Because to validly ordain, you have to have the approval of the Holy See,
Okay.
of the Pope. And if you don't have that, then you can't validly ordain, so.
When you hear conversation about returning into communion, what concessions would have to be made?
Or for Anglican priests, they have to be ordained as Catholic priests if they're going to come in. And I think every other minister except maybe an Orthodox priest would have to do that.
But there's been scuttlebutt about the church as a whole being recognized in a different way by the Catholic Church. I mean, is that just hearsay that comes up for a few years, or is there actually something to that?
It all depends on the group we're talking about. There are lots of intricacies because they all have different things they believe and different practices, and it's a complicated question. There's one of us and there's thousands of them, by this time. That's what makes it so complicated. So, and each of them are in a different place. So, okay, so here's the answer though to that question. What happened to the room closed? Yes, okay. Okay. Sacred ministers cannot deny the sacraments to those, this is Canon 843 if you have canon law with you. Sacred ministers cannot deny the sacraments to those who seek them at appropriate times, are properly disposed, and are not prohibited by law from receiving them. Okay. In 844, Catholic ministers administer the sacraments illicitly to Catholic members of the Christian faithful alone, who likewise receive them illicitly from Catholic ministers alone. Okay. And then section 2, whenever necessity requires it, there are certain conditions under which someone from an ecclesial community, a baptized Christian who is not a member of the Catholic or Orthodox churches, whenever necessity requires it or true spiritual advantage suggests it, necessity or true spiritual advantage, and provided that danger of error or indifferentism is avoided, the Christian faithful for whom it is physically or morally impossible to approach a Catholic minister are permitted to receive the sacraments of penance, Eucharist, and anointing of the sick from non-Catholic ministers in whose churches these sacraments are valid. So in other words, if it's morally or physically impossible for us to find a Catholic priest, could go to an Orthodox priest who celebrates a valid confession. We would have to know that they have a valid priesthood though, okay? And some of them we do know, many of them we do know that. So for instance, we're traveling through Russia and there's only Russian Orthodox churches in that whole area and I'm dying. Well, I could call for the Russian Orthodox priest and receive the sacraments with them, okay? That's on our side of things. But we can't go to any other Protestant minister because they don't have valid sacraments. Okay. And here's section 3. Catholic ministers administer the sacraments of penance, Catholic ministers, bishops, priests, and deacons, administer the sacraments of penance, Eucharist, and anointing of the sick. Well, those would have to be priests or bishops, Catholic ministers in this case. They administer these sacraments licitly, lawfully, to members of the Eastern churches, which do not have full communion with the Catholic Church, that's the Orthodox, okay, or some others, like the Syrian Church or the Eastern or the others. If they seek such on their own accord and are properly disposed. So those who are members of Orthodox churches may receive our sacraments if they're doing it because they want, they desire it, and they're disposed to receive them. So they need to follow our discipline on them to receive them. Say it's fast for knowledge, or the other thing. Okay. This also is valid for members of other churches which in the judgment of the Apostolic See are in the same condition in regards to these sacraments as the Eastern churches. However, here's where it changes somewhat. If the danger of death is present, or if in the judgment of the diocesan bishop or conference of bishops, some other grave necessity urges it, Catholic ministers administer these same sacraments licitly also to other Christians not having communion with the Catholic Church. And these are the conditions for baptized Christians who are not Orthodox, okay, receiving our sacraments. If they cannot approach a minister of their own community, so they have to be, it has to be impossible for them to approach a minister of their own community. And they have to seek them because they want them, not forced into it in any way. And provided they manifest Catholic faith in respect to these sacraments and are properly disposed. So they have to manifest Catholic faith. They have to believe in those sacraments as Catholics do. But that's a pretty high bar for most of the Christians from the other groups because they don't accept the Catholic sacraments, most of them. So if they're in danger of death and they don't have their own minister, and they really believe that the Catholic sacraments are true, as we believe them to be, and what was the other part? Oh, and they're properly disposed, so they have to follow our discipline. So they would have to confess their sins, that immortal sin on their soul, and they were conscious and able to do so. You know. Now, here's the situation, though. We got to get back to the theory for a minute, okay? The last few days of my grandfather's life, he was in the rehab home on the campus of Holy Cross College in South Bend, and it's run by the Holy Cross Brothers. That's where the Holy Cross Brothers, when they get sick, they go to this place called the Uzari House. Anyway, so I was leaving, I think it was maybe a day or two before my grandfather passed, and there was this lady going in, and she told me that her mother was in her last moments. And I said, oh, would you like me to come in? And she says, well, my mother isn't Catholic, okay, but I'm Catholic. And I said, okay, well, let me come and see your mother. She was still awake. She couldn't talk. She was gasping for air. And at that point, there's a danger of death. She's dying right now, okay? That's what the church is getting at here. She's dying right now. So I asked her if she was sorry. She was a believing Christian who was baptized. I asked her if she was sorry for all of her sins. She couldn't really directly answer me, but the look on her face that she gave was such to me that it communicated it was possible she was saying yes. And so I gave her the absolution. Okay? You know, it's all in the hands of God. But in the danger of death, everything's taken out of the way pretty much. I mean, if there's somebody who's never baptized before, and you ask the family members and they're unconscious, did they ever say they might like to be baptized in their life? If you get anything at all at that point. But if you get a refusal and said, no, Dad couldn't stand churches, he never wanted to be in one, he didn't want to have anything to do with God, so, you know, I can't baptize him there if he's unconscious. If they're telling me what his will is, you know, but if they would give me anything, I would baptize him, you know, if he was truly dying. So you see the bar is high because of the complication but the fact that some people desire our sacraments says that's an open door to have a dialogue with them. You know, it's an open door. We have to respect their Christian communities and their Christian faith because they are true Christians, they're brothers and sisters of ours. But as brothers and sisters in Christ, we can have a deeper dialogue, you know, and go deeper. Oh, you know, what do you like about the sacrament? What is attractive to you? Well, do you think this was from Jesus? And so on and so forth, you know? So, because I hope that clears it up. Does that clear it up a little bit as to why?
There's more, but I don't wanna waste your time right
Okay,
now.
yeah, well, you know, when we talk about, we'll get into more of this, so don't worry, we've got plenty of time, but let's get through the nuts and bolts here, as best we can, like 45 minutes or so. Okay, I'm on the valid reception of a sacrament, so here we're getting into the heart of validity. Valid and invalid, licit and illicit, those are terms you wanna know, so, gotta star those, for sure. A minister who, necessary for the validity of a sacrament, a valid reception of a sacrament are, remember, we talked about this on both sides of it, a minister who possesses the authority and power to administer the sacrament. Okay, power, okay, the power comes from Jesus Christ through the church. Okay, when I was ordained a priest, the bishop laid hands on me. I had the power to celebrate those sacraments as a priest. Inherent in the character that was implanted on my being in my ordination. But until he gave me the authority, or the faculty, if you will, to actually celebrate those sacraments, I couldn't actualize the power that I had to celebrate those sacraments. The bishop always can, because he has the fullness of the authority of the priesthood, okay? But priests and deacons, although when you are ordained, God willing, you notice how I keep saying God willing. I'm vocation director, so I have to say that all the time to our seminarians, right? And they always say it, yes, God willing, Father, you know. So, anyway, they're all good guys, but, so yeah, so if the bishop lays hands on you, you will inherently be an ordinary minister of baptism, okay, by delegation, if you're delegated by the pastor to baptize. But you won't have the authority to do it until he gives you the faculty to do it. Normally that happens under a hearing, but in some cases, maybe there's some reason why it wouldn't, and then you just couldn't go and do baptisms until you actually were extended the faculty, the authority to celebrate those sacraments. Am I right, Deacon?
Correct.
Okay.
When I was ordained, I didn't have the faculty of priest because we didn't have homily.
Okay, there you go. All right. You were capable, but you weren't able yet. Right. Okay? So, so a minister who possesses the authority and power to administer the sacrament, and who intends to do what the church intends in the administration of the sacrament. So that's, your intention needs to be what the church intends when you celebrate the sacrament as a minister. Okay. So for instance, when I pray Mass, I have to intend, when I say a prayer of intention before I celebrate Mass, I say, what do I say? It's hard to say when you're not there. Right? When you're not doing it, it's hard to say it, but let's see. I say, my intention is to celebrate Mass and make present the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ according to the rite of the Holy Roman Church. That's what I say. That's part of the prayer that I say, okay? I make my intention. And so, every time we celebrate a sacrament, we need to pray, or at least intend. Even if I don't pray the prayer, that needs to be my intention. Sometimes that intention isn't words, but it's a choice of the will that I know I've made, okay? So the second thing is the proper celebration of the sacramental rite, the sacramental matter, and the sacramental word. We've got that down pat, right? We call that the what? The matter and form together is what? The Latin term. Sacramentum sanctum. See, by the end of this, we're gonna have this terminology. Okay, and then a recipient who does not place an obstacle in the way of the grace of the sacrament. Okay. So I won't make you remember the word odax. Okay, we already talked about ex opere operato. opere operantis. This means by the work of the worker. This is the other side of ex opere operato. Okay, remember, ex opere operato was the sacrament itself work. So it refers to the individual's response to the sacraments or offering of grace. That means, does the recipient make use of the grace offered through the sacrament so it truly becomes fruitful in his life? It's the conferral of the gift of grace. This is nice. It's the unwrapping of individual's unwrapping of that gift, so putting it to use, which is Colossians 10, but that's in the textbook. Okay, fruitfulness. Fruitfulness. Okay. So let's say the sacrament has been worked. Okay, the principal effect takes place, okay? The internalization of the sacrament, the res sacramentum, the res tantum, the principal effect of the sacrament has happened in me. Now that I have the grace, the sacrament was valid, I got the grace, now I have to decide to cooperate with it, or it isn't fruitful. It won't produce extended effects or other desired or intended effects, desired and intended effects by the Lord, and desired and intended effects by me as the believing Christian, and desired and intended effects that the church intends, okay, for all of us to grow in the grace in the mystical body of Christ. So the definition of fruitfulness, in technical terminology, fruitfulness refers to the effect the sacrament has in lives of those who celebrate it. Fruitfulness refers to the individual's response to the offer of grace. A validly celebrated sacrament is effective in that it confers grace, but the sacrament is fruitful depends upon the ex opere operatus, whether or to what extent the individual wraps the gift of grace offered and puts it to use. Boy, that's huge. That is huge when people come to prepare for the sacraments, right? The couple coming for marriage, the children coming for first communion, the kid coming for confirmation. They might receive the sacrament. They might have gone to confession, been free of any serious sin. They might have received the grace and certainly the character of that sacrament with baptism or confirmation. But then did they cooperate with it or not and utilize the grace that's within them, or is it unfruitful? See, I think a lot of Catholics, they're good at going through the motions of receiving the sacraments, and they have the grace, but then it goes unused or unresponded to. And so all those wonderful spiritual gifts that they have for others, for their salvation, and even for their own eventual salvation, and the working of their salvation in the here and now, it's not happening because the grace sits there dormant, or even, if I call it a serious sin, dead. And so there is no fruitfulness. Yes?
Can you give an example?
Yeah.
Can you give an example?
Oh, sure. Well, let's take the kid at confirmation that comes and gets confirmed. He might go to confession, so he's disposed to receive the grace because he doesn't have mortal sin blocking the way, and he wants to receive confirmation. Okay? He wants to receive confirmation, but then he walks out the door, and after that, he was all exuberant about, being an adult. I hate that term, adults in the Catholic faith. They're not adults yet in the Catholic faith. They have every grace they need to be adults in the Catholic faith, but it depends on their response to that grace, doesn't it? Whether they will really be an adult in the Catholic faith or not. So the kid walks out, and he never darkens the door of a church again. He doesn't go to Mass, doesn't receive communion again. And so immediately, the grace of the baptism and confirmation becomes dormant, or in the worst case, even dead again. And there's no fruit produced. He doesn't grow in the life of Christ. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, that one is, I think, very, very common. A lot of it's due to just lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge. That, where in the scripture does it say? With the book of wisdom? That people die for the lack of knowledge or something like that. spiritual things. So, okay, it's the responsibility of the priest. I would add the deacon, it says here also the religious educator who helps the priest prepare for it, I would say the parents too, primarily, right? Parents are the primary teachers of faith for their children. For the sacraments, not only to instruct the people on the meaning of the sacraments, but obviously it's the primary responsibility of the priest, and he has others who help him with that. The priest doesn't do it, who's going to do it, right? But the deacon doesn't do it, who's going to do it, because we are ministers of the sacraments themselves. So not only to instruct the people on the meaning of the sacraments, but also to help them receive the sacraments with the proper dispositions. Okay, so we don't want somebody to go into confirmation thinking, oh, I'm gonna receive confirmation and I'm done with church for the rest of my life. That's probably not the disposition of even receiving the sacrament. Probably not. There's probably a delay in that reception of that sacrament. If somebody comes in and says that, you know, or the married couple or the couple getting married who says, well, I got lots of examples, but is that what they do? I use them all. I had a very intelligent couple come to me for their stuff. The man was going to law school at Michigan State. The gal was like some kind of scientist in a PhD program or something. And she was a Catholic, and she hadn't been practicing her faith in a long time. But because her grandmother died in the last 2 years, she just felt that her grandmother would have wanted her to be married in the church, which is a nice desire. Nothing wrong with that, you know. But in the end, you know, I had to have a pretty frank conversation, a charitable conversation. I tried to do everything I could, but I had to say, you know, if you want to receive this is a sacrament. If you really desire to receive it, then you have to want to be Catholic. You have to want to practice the Catholic faith. You have to believe it. If you don't, then you got to be intellectually honest and make a choice here. I didn't tell her that we didn't want her to be married in the church, that we didn't want it for her. I gave her every good reason why she would want it, you know, and all of that. But in the end, if a person doesn't want it, you can't force it on them, you know. And I said, you know, you have to be intellectually honest. Do you want this? If you want this, I'm all for it. But if you don't really want this, then you have to make the choice you have to make. You know, she didn't come back. You know, it's sad. But you know, is that person gonna come back maybe someday and say, let's put it this way, they didn't have faith at all then. The working of a sacrament isn't magical. You know, it's not magical. If my free will doesn't want to cooperate with it, it's not going to happen. So from my perspective, it was sad, but maybe it's not ultimately sad, because maybe later on, if she has a conversion of heart, she'll say, oh, there's a priest who is telling me, you know, teaching me something about my relationship with the Lord, and I just didn't get it at that time. And I wasn't ready for it. I'm glad he didn't, because, you know, I just be going through the motions. There are people who come back after years and say that, you know. If we deal with them in a charitable way, always charitable, but truthful, you know. We don't want to step on the conscience of other people, you know. Remember, there's no force. Maybe you can do a little cajoling, but, you know, I mean, leave them with honey. But by the same token, if they've revealed their conscience and their conscience is just saying no, we can't, it's not charitable to let them go forward, you know. Okay. Following number 5. So the priest accomplishes in the